Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to explore something pretty incredible with me today?
Always. What are we diving into today?
Today, it's all about blood-based biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease.
Oh, wow. That's a big one.
It is, and we've got some fascinating sources lined up.
Like what?
We'll be looking at cutting-edge research from scientific journals, but also some really interesting perspectives from traditional Chinese medicine.
Sounds like we've got a pretty diverse mix.
We do, and that's what I love about these deep dives. We get to explore all these different angles and really unpack the topic for you guys.
Totally. So where do we even begin with something as complex as Alzheimer's?
Well, I think the biggest headline here is that we're talking about a potential revolution in diagnostics.
A revolution.
Ah.
Okay, you've got my attention.
Imagine this, a simple blood test that can detect Alzheimer's.
Wait, really? No more spinal taps or brain scans?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just a blood draw and bam.
Yeah.
You've got potentially life-changing information about whether or not you have those telltale signs of Alzheimer's like amyloid plaques and tau tangles.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like we've moved from guesswork to a molecular level understanding of the disease.
Exactly. And the accuracy of these tests is mind-blowing. For example, the p-tau217 test has an accuracy rate of 95 to 98%.
Seriously? That's amazing. So what does this mean for people? Why is this early detection such a big deal?
Well, for starters, it opens up the possibility of intervening earlier, potentially slowing or even halting the disease's progression.
Okay, I can see why you called this a revolution.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. We need to be realistic about what early detection actually means for you if a guaranteed cure isn't yet available.
Right. There's still so much we don't know about Alzheimer's.
Exactly. We're still in the early stages of developing definitive treatments, especially for those who aren't showing any symptoms.
So it's exciting, but also a bit of a gray area.
Yeah, it's not as simple as early detection equals problem solved. There are a lot of ethical and clinical challenges that come with this new technology.
Absolutely. One of the biggest concerns is the potential psychological impact of a positive result for someone who isn't experiencing any symptoms.
I can imagine getting that news and not knowing what to do next could be really overwhelming.
Exactly. Especially if there isn't a clear path forward in terms of treatment. It's a lot to process.
It really is. And then there's the financial burden of testing and treatment. Not everyone has equal access to healthcare. So that's another layer of complexity.
You're right. We can't ignore those disparities. And it's not just about the science. It's about ensuring that these advancements are accessible and beneficial for everyone.
It's about equity and responsible implementation.
I read an article about how the medical community is grappling with how to handle positive results in asymptomatic patients. It's such a tricky situation.
Yeah, it's not a simple black and white situation.
Yeah.
Informed consent and patient education are going to be absolutely vital.
People need to understand what a positive result actually means and what their options are. They need to be empowered to make informed decisions.
Exactly. And organizations like the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force are doing important work. They're evaluating the research, developing guidelines, and trying to navigate all these ethical dilemmas.
They're playing a key role in making sure that these new technologies are used responsibly.
It's a big responsibility. But on a more positive note, I'm excited about the variety of blood tests that are emerging. We're not just talking about one test. There are multiple approaches.
It's like a whole wave of innovation, and one that really caught my eye is the TempoSec gene expression test.
I've heard about that one. What's so special about it?
Well, for starters, it uses a simple finger stick.
A finger stick, that's it.
Yeah, imagine getting tested in your doctor's office with just a quick finger prick. No needles, no spinal taps.
Talk about accessibility. That could be a game changer, especially for people who might have difficulty accessing more invasive testing.
And it's super accurate, too. Studies have shown accuracy rates of 90% for Alzheimer's and even 94% for Parkinson's disease.
How does it even work?
It analyzes gene expression patterns in dried blood spots. It's pretty cutting edge.
That's amazing. And it highlights another important point. We need to make sure that these advancements reach the communities that are disproportionately affected by Alzheimer's, like non-Hispanic, Black, and Hispanic Americans.
Accessibility and equity are key.
Absolutely. Now, I'm curious about something you mentioned earlier, traditional Chinese medicine.
Ah, yes. That's where things get really interesting. We tend to think of Alzheimer's through the lens of Western medicine, but there are other perspectives out there.
And what does traditional Chinese medicine have to say about it?
Well, our sources pointed to something called the Renchen Shou decoction, or RSSW.
RSSW.
It's a herbal concoction that's been used for centuries, and there's some intriguing research suggesting it could play a role in treating Alzheimer's.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What's in this concoction?
It includes ingredients like Panax ginseng and Polygomenes multiflorum, powerful plants with a long history of medicinal use.
So what does the research say about RSSW and Alzheimer's?
Well, preliminary studies suggest that it can enhance memory, inhibit tau hyperphosphorylation, and even reduce amyloid plaque accumulation.
Wow, those are some pretty significant effects.
They are. But of course, we need more research, especially large-scale human studies, to confirm these findings.
Of course. It's still early days.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to consider these traditional remedies alongside the advancements we're seeing in Western medicine.
It's all about exploring different approaches and finding what works best for each individual.
And keeping an open mind. Sometimes ancient wisdom and modern science can complement each other in surprising ways.
So now I want to turn it over to you guys listening. What are your thoughts on all of this? Would you get tested knowing what you now know?
It's a big decision, and there's no right or wrong answer. But hopefully this deep dive has given you some food for thought.
And remember, this is just the beginning. We'll be back with part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into the science and the stories behind these groundbreaking tests, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into blood-based biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease.
It's amazing to think we can now see those changes happening in the brain before symptoms even show up.
Yeah, like those amyloid plaques and cow tangles. We used to rely on observing symptoms like memory loss, but these blood tests give us a whole new level of insight.
It's like having a window into the brain.
Exactly. And it's not just about replacing older methods like spinal taps. It's about fundamentally changing how we understand Alzheimer's itself.
You know, in part 1, I called this a revolution in diagnostics, and I think that's even more true now that we're talking about the science behind it.
Absolutely. We're not just diagnosing a disease based on its outward signs. We're understanding its root causes at a molecular level.
It's like cracking the code.
And that opens up a whole world of possibilities for treatment and prevention.
Imagine a future where we can essentially stop Alzheimer's in its tracks.
That's the dream, right?
Yeah.
But we have to be realistic. We're still in the early stages. There's still so much we don't know.
Like how these biomarkers actually translate into cognitive decline.
Right. And we don't have a guaranteed cure yet. But the research is moving at an incredible pace.
It's exciting, but also a bit daunting. There's this constant push and pull between scientific discovery and ethical considerations.
It's a delicate balance. We need to be having open and honest conversations about the potential benefits and the potential risks of these new tests.
And about what it all means for patients.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Healthcare professionals are going to play a crucial role in all of this.
They're the ones on the front lines. They're the ones who need to interpret these test results, counsel patients, and navigate all the ethical dilemmas that might come up.
We need to make sure they have the knowledge and the resources to do that effectively.
One article I read mentioned the importance of something called positive predictive value, or PPV.
Ah, yes, PPV. It's all about understanding that a positive test result doesn't necessarily mean the same thing for everyone.
So it's not as simple as you have the biomarkers, therefore you have Alzheimer's.
Right. There's a lot of nuance involved. It depends on your age, your family history, your overall health.
That's why a doctor's guidance is so crucial.
Absolutely. They can help you understand what the results mean for you specifically and what your options are.
And it highlights the need for clear guidelines and educational programs for healthcare professionals.
They need to feel confident in using these tests and communicating the results to their patients.
Another point that really stood out to me was the need for more research on diverse populations.
Oh, absolutely. We can't assume that what works for one group will work for everyone.
And that's especially important when you consider the health disparities that already exist.
We need to make sure that these new technologies are accessible and beneficial for all communities.
It's about equity.
Exactly. And speaking of access, there's been a lot of talk about direct-to-consumer blood tests for Alzheimer's.
Yeah, I've seen those advertised online. What do you think about them?
Well, it's complicated. On the one hand, they offer people a sense of agency and control over their health. They can get tested without having to go through a doctor.
Which could be really empowering for some people.
But on the other hand, there are concerns about accuracy and interpretation and the potential for psychological distress.
I can imagine getting a positive result from one of those tests and not having a healthcare professional to talk to about it. That could be really scary.
It's important to have safeguards in place. These tests need to meet rigorous standards for accuracy, and they should always come with clear disclaimers, emphasizing the importance of consulting a healthcare professional.
It's a balancing act between accessibility and responsibility.
Exactly. And that's a theme that keeps coming up in our deep dive. The potential of blood-based biomarkers is huge, but we need to proceed thoughtfully and ethically.
With a focus on equity and access for all.
You got it. Now, are you ready for a bit of a shifting gears?
Always. What's next?
Let's talk about traditional Chinese medicine.
You know, when I first saw that in our research, I was a little surprised, but then I started digging into it, and it's actually fascinating.
I had a similar reaction. It's not what you typically expect to see alongside these cutting-edge blood tests.
Right. But it makes sense when you think about it. Alzheimer's is a complex disease, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Sometimes ancient wisdom and modern science can work together in unexpected ways.
Our sources highlighted the Renshin Showu decoction, or RSSW.
That's the herbal concoction.
Yep, and there's some preliminary research suggesting it could have therapeutic benefits for Alzheimer's.
Okay, now you really have my attention. Tell me more.
Well, studies suggest that it can enhance memory, inhibit tau hyperphosphorylation, and even reduce amyloid plaque accumulation.
Wow, that's impressive. What are the key ingredients?
Panax ginseng and Polygonum multiflorum.
Herbs with a long history of medicinal use.
Exactly, and they seem to work synergistically, meaning they enhance each other's effects.
That's so cool. So how does it actually work on a cellular level?
Research suggests that RSSW interacts with SIRT1 pathways.
SIRT1. Remind me what that is again.
Think of SIRT1 as the conductor of an orchestra keeping all the brain's functions in harmony. RSSW might be boosting that conductor's power, protecting against the off-key notes of Alzheimer's.
I love that analogy. It makes it so much easier to understand.
So on the one hand, we have these incredible blood tests that can detect Alzheimer's early. And on the other hand, we have these traditional herbal remedies that might help protect the brain. It's like we're approaching this disease from all angles.
And that's what makes this field so exciting. We're constantly learning more and developing new approaches.
But it also means we need to be really thoughtful about how we use this knowledge.
We need to have open and honest conversations with patients about the risks and the benefits of these tests and treatments.
And we need to make sure that everyone has access to the care they need.
Because ultimately the goal is to empower people to make informed decisions about their health and well-being.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. But we're not done yet.
There's still so much more to explore.
In part 3, we'll delve even deeper into the intersection of modern science and traditional medicine. And we'll talk about what it all means for you.
Stay tuned. It's going to be fascinating.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive into blood-based biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease.
Ready to wrap things up.
Ready as I'll ever be. We've covered so much ground already, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
It's a really complex topic, and there's so much research happening right now.
That's what makes it so exciting, though. We're on the cusp of a real breakthrough in how we understand and treat Alzheimer's.
It feels like a turning point.
And in this last part, I want to focus on the idea of hope.
Hope.
Because for so long, an Alzheimer's diagnosis felt like a death sentence. There wasn't much you could do.
I get that. But these new blood tests, they offer a glimmer of hope.
Exactly. Because now we have the potential to detect the disease early and maybe even intervene before significant damage occurs.
It's the possibility of changing the trajectory of the disease.
And that's huge. But it's not just about early detection. It's also about exploring different treatment options.
Like those traditional Chinese medicine approaches we talked about.
Exactly. I'm so fascinated by the Renshin Showu decoction, or RSSW.
Me too. It's amazing to think that these ancient herbs might hold some keys to protecting the brain from Alzheimer's.
The research is still preliminary, but the potential is there. And it's a great example of how sometimes we need to look beyond conventional Western medicine.
To find new solutions.
And maybe even rediscover some old ones.
Because sometimes ancient wisdom and modern science can work together in surprising ways.
So where does that leave us?
With a lot of questions still, but also with a sense of optimism, I think.
I agree. It feels like we're entering a new era in Alzheimer's research and treatment.
An era where we have more tools and more options than ever before.
And where we're not afraid to explore different approaches, whether they're rooted in cutting-edge science or ancient tradition.
It's about finding what works best for each individual.
And empowering people to take control of their brain health.
So if you're listening to this and feeling overwhelmed or scared,
I want you to remember that there is hope.
There's a whole community of researchers, doctors, and patients working together to find a cure.
And we're getting closer every day.
So stay informed, stay curious, and most importantly, stay hopeful.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into blood-based biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
And we'll see you next time for another fascinating journey into the world of knowledge.